What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing good and having an amazing day. So it's no secret that the UK property market has gone absolutely mad this year. The knock-on effect of the pandemic has sent house prices skyrocketing, partly due to things like the stamp duty holiday that was introduced, which has potentially artificially inflated house values, and also due to the fact that more people are actually working from home, so they might actually value their home environment a lot more than they used to. Now, the housing market last year in 2020 increased by a huge 7.3%, which is a pretty dramatic increase in a market where many already thought that it was overvalued. Now, this increase in housing value may be good, especially if you're already on the property ladder. However, it's just made it even more difficult for first-time buyers to get into the market. It's become so competitive that a lot of people are even paying over asking price for a lot of properties. And for first-time buyers, it just opens up the question as to whether or not it's the right time to try and get into property. Understandably, it's a valid concern that we might be in a housing bubble that's about to burst, that could see the house prices tumble over the next couple of years. And who knows what's going to happen when we see the stamp duty holiday finally come to an end, along with the furlough scheme that could leave us with mass unemployment in the country, and also what happens if interest rates rise. Now, honestly, no one knows exactly what's going to happen, and it is useful to speculate on these things, but should it stop you from carrying on with your life and getting on with the things that you want to do, for example, buying your first property? So in today's video, I want to go over the new Help to Buy equity loan scheme, and actually explain exactly how it works, but then also go over how I think it can be used as a great way to hedge against a falling housing market if property prices do start to fall. Now, before we get into it, if you are new around here, welcome to the channel. This really is the place to be for all the most relevant information on UK finance. So if you're not already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and click that bell so you never miss a video. And I know it is a bit cheeky asking before the video's even started, but I'd really appreciate it if you guys could smash that like button, as it does really help me out with the YouTube algorithm and just allows YouTube to share these videos to more people that might find them useful or interesting. And as always, just as a quick disclaimer, this is in no way financial advice. I'm simply just outlining information and giving my honest opinions and thoughts. Always make sure to do your own research and due diligence when it comes to your finances. But with all that being said, let's get into the video. Okay, so before we go over exactly how it works and how I think is best to use it in today's market, I just want to quickly run through who's actually eligible to use the scheme, because actually the scheme we're looking at today is just for those living in England. And other schemes are available in other parts of the UK, but this is just the one we're looking at today. Now, if you want to take part in this scheme, the main thing that you need to do is be a first-time buyer. So what this means is that you can't have ever owned a property before, whether that's in the UK or abroad, and this also includes if you've ever owned a stake in a property or in a business premises. Also, if you are buying with a partner, both of you have to be first-time buyers. Now, there are also restrictions on the type of properties that are eligible to take part in this scheme. So the main thing is that they all have to be new build properties, and the house building company has to be a registered Help to Buy builder. Now, there are also restrictions on the value of the property that you can buy. So I'll stick all of that information on the screen now, but you can see basically it varies depending on which part of the country you live in as to what value of property you can buy. So in the northeast, where living costs are generally lower, the maximum property value you can buy is £186,000, compared to in London, where you can buy something that's worth up to £600,000. Now, in all of these cases, no matter how much the value is of the property that you're intending to buy, you're going to need to be able to get together at least a 5% deposit. And then the government will actually lend you up to 20% to add to your deposit. But you can also put down more than 5% if you want to and still take advantage of that 20% loan. So the idea is, with this equity loan, it allows you to increase your deposit size without spending years and years trying to save for it. And because of the fact that you have a larger deposit, this could reduce your monthly mortgage repayments. Now, this next bit is where it gets good. So the equity loan itself is actually interest-free for 5 years, meaning if you borrow that money and pay it back within the 5 years, you're not going to have to pay any interest on top of that. And it's only when you exceed that 5-year repayment period that you'll actually start paying interest on the money. And the only thing you're going to have to pay for is a £1 a month admin fee, which equates to £12 a year. Now, that all being said, if you do exceed the 5-year repayment period, you'll actually start paying interest on that money. So I'll stick that on the screen now. So you can see in the 1 to 5 year period, it's completely interest free. Then in 6 years, you'll start paying 1.75%. And for every additional year where the loan isn't repaid, the interest rate will keep creeping up. Now, one thing that I think is really cool about this equity loan is that you can still use other government schemes to help save for your initial deposit. So you can use things like the Help to Buy ISA and the Lifetime ISA. My personal favourite is the Lifetime ISA, as I think it offers so much potential. And if you do want to know more about that particular scheme, I'll leave a link down below in the description to my video where I go over all of the detail that you need to know about it and how you can best utilise it. Now, that mostly covers exactly how the loan part of the scheme works, but there are quite a few important things to know and understand when it comes to the repayment process. So the main thing that you need to understand and be a bit careful of is that as the value of your property increases or decreases, so does the actual equity loan amount that you have to repay. So let's say you bought a house for £300,000 and used the 20% equity loan from the government and put in 5% of your own money towards that deposit. If the value of that house increased by 10% over that 5-year period, the total value of the property would be up to £330,000, but then that 10% will also be applied to the equity loan that you need to pay back. So assuming that the loan amount that you borrowed was 20%, that would be £60,000, and because the property's increased by 10% in value, you then have to pay back an additional £6,000 on top of the £60,000. But this also works in exactly the same way if the property value decreases. So if that same £300,000 property decreased by 10%, leaving the total value of the property at £270,000, this would also decrease the equity loan that you have to pay back to the government by 10%, which would equate to £6,000 off the £60,000, leaving you with £54,000 to pay back. Now this factor alone could be potentially quite worrying for some, because if the property value increases significantly, it could make it even more difficult to pay back that equity loan amount. But the good thing is there is a bit of flexibility when it comes to paying back that loan. So actually over that 5-year period where that loan amount is interest free, you can actually pay it off at any time. So if say 3 years in the value of your house decreases, that might be the time to pay it all off, and you'll actually pay off less than you initially borrowed. And you also don't have to pay it all off at once. However, you are restricted to paying it off in minimum increments of 10% of the total value of the property. So say you borrowed 20%, you could do it in 2 chunks throughout that 5-year period, or you could do it all at once if you choose to. Okay, so that basically covers exactly how this scheme works and how it's intended to be used. But honestly, I think it is a little bit limited and could leave many people feeling a bit overextended and over-leveraged in a way that probably wouldn't feel that comfortable to do in reality, as it leaves you with a huge equity loan to repay as well as monthly mortgage repayments. And to actually be able to repay the loan relies quite heavily on the value of the property going up to then pay it off with equity gained from the increase in value, but also alternatively requiring you to increase your monthly earnings. Now with all that being said, I actually see that this equity loan actually has huge potential if you use it in a slightly different way from how it was initially intended. And this is through combining 2 fairly simple concepts. So firstly, utilising low interest rates and using them to your advantage. And then 2, using that leveraged money to make higher returns elsewhere, for example in the stock market. So it'd be sort of like borrowing that money interest free, keeping it, earning interest on that money, and then when you pay it back, you keep the difference. However, to be able to do it effectively, you need to have the same amount of money that you're actually borrowing available to then invest elsewhere. And you'd also need a good understanding of stock market investing. Now this idea isn't exactly straightforward and can be a little bit complex to understand. So I'll use an example to try and make it as clear as possible. So let's say you found a new build property that you want to buy that's valued at £300,000. A 5% deposit for this would be £15,000, and then assuming that you use that 20% equity loan, that would bring in another £60,000 to your total. So your total deposit would be £75,000, and then that would leave you with a 75% mortgage of £225,000 to pay back. Now honestly, in a standard situation, if you put all of your money towards that 5% deposit and you have nothing left over, that would be a pretty daunting situation. As you'll know, after that 5 years, you'll have to come up with £60,000 to pay back that equity loan. But let's say the situation was a little bit different and you really focused on reducing your spending and saving up for that 25% deposit. You could still put down just that 5% and then still take advantage of that 20% equity loan. And then essentially you've got £60,000 to play with over that 5-year period where the loan is interest free to try and make some sort of return on that money. Now obviously you could put all that money into the property and just not take the loan at all. But honestly, why not take advantage of this opportunity where you can borrow money for free? So assuming you've done this and put down £15,000 into the property, taken that £60,000 loan, and then have that £60,000 to invest yourself. Let's say you put that money into the stock market. So my go-to example is always the S&P 500. So the S&P 500 is a US index made up of the 500 largest trading US companies. And this index has literally been around for decades. And on average, it increases in value by between 8 and 10% per year. So say you invested that £60,000 into the S&P 500 over that 5-year period where you have that interest-free loan, assuming you made the average of 8% per year in returns, at the end of that 5-year period, that £60,000 would now be worth £89,000, assuming all profits are compounded and reinvested. So then at the end of that 5-year period where the interest-free loan ends and you're required to pay back that £60,000, assuming the house value hasn't varied at all and you still just have to pay £60,000 back, you would be paying back £60,000 and keeping £29,000 in profit. But the really cool thing about this is that the S&P 500 is just a benchmark, and there are so many other lucrative investments out there where you could stand to make much more than this. However, all of that being said, investing in the stock market is by no means risk-free and returns are definitely not guaranteed, and you could also lose money on your investments. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, as the housing market has done so well recently, it can leave people feeling very uncomfortable when buying in at the moment, due to the fact that there is concern that the housing market might crash in the near future. But with that being said, if you have the funds and the flexibility to do so, I believe using this method of taking advantage of the equity loan could actually hedge your investments against the falling housing market if it does end up happening. Also, if the property market does crash and the value of your house goes down during the 5-year period that you have that equity loan, you could actually just pay off that entire loan when it's at a lower price and then essentially keep the difference. Now, obviously this still isn't ideal if the value of your property does decrease, as it could lead to you having negative equity when you come to remortgage. However, the fact is, if you need somewhere to live and you want to get into property, you can't just sit around and wait for the ideal time to buy in, because it's impossible to tell whether or not it was a good time to get in until you have the hindsight of looking back. Okay, so that basically covers the basic premise of how you could use this equity loan to your advantage if you have enough capital to be able to utilise the loan and invest elsewhere. But as with anything, there are always risks and limitations, so I just want to go over those now. So firstly, I think the biggest limitation is that a lot of people just simply won't be able to do this, purely because of the fact that it's really difficult to scrape together a 5% deposit, let alone a 25% deposit. And so for that reason, if you don't have the excess savings to cover the equity loan that you'd be borrowing, you're not really going to be able to take advantage of that 0% interest. Next up, if the property value does actually increase, it could leave you in a difficult situation having to pay back more than you initially borrowed, because as the property value increases, so does the equity loan amount. And for this reason, it could make it more difficult to sell to then buy a more expensive property in the future. It also could go disastrously wrong if your stock market investments don't actually do very well. And even for the most experienced investors, it's not unheard of that you can lose money on your investments. Also, you could be making money on your stock market investments, but at a slower rate compared to the increase in value of your property. So actually in this case, you'd have been better to not take the equity loan, not invest in the stock market, and just put all that money straight into the property. But obviously you can never really tell with exact certainty which is the best option to go for. Another limitation is that not everyone wants to buy a new build property. So what this means is that it could actually be quite difficult for you to add value to the property in the time period that you're living in it. And sometimes new build properties are sold at a premium. And with that being said, it's always essential to make sure that you're never getting a bad deal. So if you are buying a property, even though you're taking advantage of certain things and feel like you're making money elsewhere, you still want to make sure that you're not overpaying for that initial property, as it could just cause a lot more problems than you might have thought down the line. And it's always better to try and make sure that you're getting a good deal at every opportunity. Another potential limitation of this strategy is that if you do use the buy-to-let equity loan, you might not always get the most competitive mortgage rates. So that again is just something to look into and consider. Another limitation of this scheme is that you're not actually allowed to rent out the property as a buy-to-let. So with the Help to Buy equity loan, it is a scheme designed for first-time buyers to buy their first home to actually live in. So you can't rent out the entire property as a buy-to-let. But that being said, in the future, once the equity loan's paid off and maybe you've bought another property for you to live in, there should be no reason then why you can't rent it out. One final thing to note is that if you intend on selling the property, you actually have to pay off the entire equity loan before doing so. So if you aren't intending on living in the property for very long, this could actually cause you some problems. So overall, I just want to sum up my final thoughts. Now obviously I don't think this concept will be for everyone, as it does potentially create a lot of extra risk that a lot of people might not feel comfortable with. And to be able to do it effectively and actually make money from the situation, it does require a good understanding of stock market investing. But I do think taking advantage of it in this way could open up huge opportunities in the future. And like I said, I think it's a great hedge against a potential declining housing market that also allows you to not be overextended in one asset class. But there we have it, that basically covers everything for today, guys. I really hope you guys did enjoy this one as much as I did. I personally find this topic really interesting, and I really hope you guys did as well. I'm really interested to know what you guys actually think of this concept or strategy. So do let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. And as always, if you have any questions or feedback for me, I'll make sure to respond to all comments. If you did make it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I'd really appreciate it if you guys could smash that like button, as it does really help me out with the YouTube algorithm, and just allows YouTube to share these videos to more people that might find them useful or interesting. And as always, if you are new around here, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below and click that bell so you never miss a video. But with all that being said, take it easy guys and keep saving.